Die faster, we need the money. Those were the words my grandson, Emmanuel, whispered in my ear as I lay in that cold hospital bed in Ohio. My chest tightened, not from the illness that had kept me there for weeks, but from the sting of his cruelty. His voice was sharp, impatient, dripping with greed. He thought no one else could hear. He thought his secret was safe. But he had no idea about the small hidden camera tucked between the flowers by my bedside, recording every single visit, every word, every sneer. He also had no idea that my will, the one he was so hungry for, had already been rewritten. Not in his favor. Not in any of their favors. The day he would finally open, that would be the day his jaw would drop to the floor, when he discovered that every single dollar, every piece of property, every bit of inheritance he expected had gone to Ruth, the nurse who had been taking care of me, the one who had been secretly recording his cruelty and showing me the truth. But at that moment, lying there with Emmanuel's harsh words in my ears, I felt a shiver run down my spine. My own blood, my grandson, was waiting for me to die so he could cash in. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but my mind was racing, replaying every choice I had made that had brought me to this moment. Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Let me know where you are watching from. You don't know, you might just get a shout out in our next video. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy stories like this one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand how things came to this. I'm Elizabeth, 65 years old, born and raised in Ohio. I never thought my life would turn into something people would shake their heads at, a story filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and revenge. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? I had always been a giver. When my husband Michael passed away 15 years ago, I poured my heart into my family. I raised my two children, Abigail and Joe, as best as I could, making sure they had everything I didn't. I even helped raise my grandson, Emmanuel, who was just a boy then, sweet, polite, full of promises. He would sit on my porch swing, asking me to tell him stories about when I was young, or to bake him my famous apple pie. Back then, I believed he loved me. Back then, I believed family meant everything. But over the years, I started to see cracks. Emmanuel grew restless. He wanted money, fast. He gambled, he borrowed, he lied. And when his father, Joe, refused to bail him out anymore, Emmanuel began looking at me, the old woman with a paid-off house and a healthy savings account, as his next solution. At first, I thought I was imagining things. He would drop hints about what he would do when he got the inheritance. He would ask me about my will as if it were casual conversation. I brushed it off thinking, he's just young. He'll grow out of this. But he didn't. His greed grew bolder. One Sunday afternoon after church, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Grandma, you don't need all that money just sitting there. Why don't you give me some now? I could use it to start a business." I laughed it off at the time, but something in his tone made me uneasy. It wasn't a request. It was a demand, hidden under a fake smile. That was the first low. The first moment I realized that the boy I once held close had turned into someone I barely recognized. But nothing compared to what came next. A few weeks later, I got sick. It started as a cough that wouldn't go away, then weakness, then chest pains. My daughter Abigail insisted I go to the hospital. That's when I met Ruth, the nurse who would later become more than just a caregiver. She was kind in ways my own family wasn't anymore. She brushed my hair, prayed with me, even smuggled in chocolate when the hospital food tasted like cardboard. She didn't know me, but she treated me like I mattered. Meanwhile, Emmanuel's visits were short and sharp. He would show up, check his phone more than he checked on me, and mutter about how long this was going to take. At first, I wanted to believe I was wrong, that maybe he was just uncomfortable in hospitals. But then came the night he leaned down and whispered those horrible words. "Die faster, we need the money." He thought I was asleep. He thought the machines were louder than his voice. He thought no one cared. But Ruth heard. I saw her stiffen, her kind face tightening with anger. And I knew then that I wasn't crazy. Emmanuel truly wanted me gone. That night, Ruth sat by my bed after Emmanuel left. "Elizabeth," she said softly, "I think we need to talk about something important." And that was the beginning of everything. The plan, the hidden camera, the rewriting of the will, the slow, careful steps toward revenge that Emmanuel would never see coming. But before any of that happened, I had to face the heartbreak of knowing my own blood had turned against me. The boy I once loved like sunshine now wanted me buried 6 feet under. I lay awake in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought to myself, if kindness means nothing to them, then maybe justice will. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the door opened that night, and in walked not just Emmanuel, but Joe, my own son. And the look on his face told me something even darker was about to unfold. The hospital door creaked open, and there stood Joe, my son, Emmanuel's father. His eyes looked hollow, the kind of tired that comes from years of gambling, drinking, and chasing empty dreams. I knew that look well. Michael, my late husband, had battled with that same darkness before he turned his life around. But Joe, he never turned his around. Mom, Joe said quietly, stepping inside. He glanced around the room, making sure the nurse wasn't there. His shoulders slumped, and his voice dropped into a whisper. We need to talk. My heart sank. The words were almost identical to Emmanuel's earlier. We need to talk. I already knew this wasn't about love, or concern for my health, or missing me. No, this was about money. Always money. What is it, Joe? I asked, trying to sound calm, though my chest burned. He rubbed his face with both hands. Look, Mom, Emmanuel's in trouble. You know he owes people. Serious people. They're after him. If he doesn't pay them off soon, things are gonna get ugly. I need you to help us. Just transfer some money from your account, okay? I swear we'll pay you back. I stared at him, my own son, begging me to drain the savings I had built over a lifetime. Not for food, not for shelter, not for something noble, but to bail out his reckless boy's gambling debts. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Joe, I said softly, do you even hear yourself? I am lying here, hooked up to machines, fighting for my life, and all you can think about is my bank account. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw something dark flicker in his eyes, something that made me feel like I wasn't safe with him in that room. Mom, you don't understand, he said, his voice sharp now. If you don't help us, Emmanuel could get hurt. Do you want that on your conscience? I swallowed hard. That was the moment I realized how far gone he was. My son wasn't asking. He was threatening. He was using my love for Emmanuel as a weapon against me. But he didn't know what I knew. He didn't know about Ruth, about the camera, about the will I had changed just days before. I looked him straight in the eye and said, Joe, if Emmanuel is in trouble, then maybe he needs to face the consequences of his choices. I will not be bullied into giving up everything I've worked for. His face turned red, his fists clenched at his sides, and for a split second I thought he might hit me. But then, as if remembering where he was, he muttered something under his breath and stormed out of the room, the door slamming so hard behind him that the flowers on the windowsill shook. That was the extreme. The moment I saw clearly that my son and grandson were united, not in love, but in greed. I lay back against my pillow, my body trembling. Tears filled my eyes, not for myself, but for the family I thought I had. I remembered when Joe was a little boy, running barefoot through the Ohio fields, laughing as Michael chased him with a garden hose. I remembered the warmth, the innocence, the love. Where had it all gone? Ruth came in a few minutes later, carrying a fresh blanket. She saw my tears and gently placed the blanket over me. Elizabeth, she said, I don't know what happened just now, but I could feel the tension in the hallway. Do you want to talk about it? I nodded weakly. Ruth, I don't think they love me anymore. They love what I have. She pulled up a chair and sat beside me. Her eyes, kind but fierce, met mine. That's not love, Elizabeth. That's greed. Real love is sacrifice, patience, kindness. That's what I've seen in you, not them. Her words were balm to my aching heart. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. I felt valued, not because of what I had in the bank, but because of who I was as a person. That was the less extreme moment, the comfort, the reminder that kindness still existed in this world, even if it didn't come from the people who shared my blood. We talked for hours that night. Ruth told me about her own struggles, How she grew up poor in Kentucky, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs. How she had seen family members tear each other apart over money when her grandmother died. It's always the same, Ruth said, shaking her head. Money shows people's true colors. I nodded. Then maybe it's time I showed them mine. And that's when I told her about the will. Ruth gasped. Elizabeth, you're serious? You left everything to me. I smiled faintly. Yes, you don't know this, Ruth, but you saved me. Not just with your medical care. You saved my spirit. You reminded me what love is supposed to feel like. And I want my life's work to go to someone who will honor it, not destroy it. She wiped a tear from her eye and squeezed my hand. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I whispered. Just promise me one thing. Keep recording. Keep documenting everything. When the time comes, they'll need to see what they've become. Ruth nodded firmly. You can count on me. I thought that would bring me peace. And for a moment it did. But peace never lasted long in that hospital room. The next day, Abigail, my daughter, showed up. She hadn't visited in weeks. And when she walked in, I could tell from her stiff smile and restless hands that something was terribly wrong. She sat down, leaned close to me, and whispered words that made my blood run cold. Mom, I think Emmanuel and Joe are planning something. Something dangerous. Mom, I think Emmanuel and Joe are planning something. Something dangerous. The words sank into me like ice water. I turned my head slowly toward Abigail, my only daughter, and searched her face for signs of exaggeration. But her eyes were wide, her lips trembling, and her fingers twisted the strap of her purse nervously. What do you mean, Abigail? I asked, my voice weaker than I wanted it to be. She glanced toward the door, lowered her voice, and leaned closer. I overheard them last night at Joe's house. Emmanuel was furious, saying he couldn't wait any longer. He said, she swallowed hard, he said if you didn't give them the money soon, they'd make sure you couldn't say no anymore. The hospital room suddenly felt colder. My skin prickled and my stomach twisted. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were willing to push me faster toward that end. I gripped Abigail's hand tightly. Are you telling me they plan to kill me? Her silence said more than words ever could. The heart monitor beside me beeped louder as my pulse raced. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. These were my boys, my son, my grandson. The same ones I had rocked to sleep, kissed goodnight, and prayed for every day of their lives. And now, they were plotting against me like wolves circling an old sheep. Why are you telling me this? I asked softly, my voice trembling. Abigail squeezed my hand. Because I can't stand by and watch them do this to you, Mom. I know I've made mistakes in the past, but I won't let them hurt you. Not if I can stop it. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of hope. Maybe not all of my family was lost to greed. Maybe Abigail still had a conscience. But a voice in my head whispered, can you really trust her? I wanted to believe her, but I had been burned too many times. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. Still, I nodded. Thank you, Abigail. I needed to know. She stayed with me for a while, talking about small things, her job, her kids, the weather in Ohio that had turned bitterly cold. For a little while, it almost felt normal, like mother and daughter catching up. The less extreme moments of life, those quiet conversations that held no danger, no greed, were a reminder of what things used to be like before money poisoned everything. But even as we talked, her warning echoed in my mind. They'd make sure you couldn't say no anymore. That night, after Abigail left, Ruth came in with my dinner tray. I told her what Abigail had said. Her eyes narrowed, and she set the tray down with a sharp clatter. This is worse than I thought, Ruth muttered. Elizabeth, we can't just sit here and wait. We need to take action. I nodded slowly. You're right. But what can I do from this bed? I'm old, I'm weak. You're not weak, Ruth interrupted firmly. You're smart. You've lived longer than they have. And you've already done something powerful. You changed the will. Now we just need to make sure they don't force your hand before the time comes. Her words gave me strength. Yes, my body was failing me, but my mind was still sharp. And if there was one thing I had left, it was the ability to outthink them. I spent the next day thinking about my life, about all the moments that had led me here. I remembered Michael, my late husband, his rough hands holding mine during our wedding vows. I remembered Joe as a child, clinging to my leg at the county fair because he was afraid of the fireworks. I remembered Emmanuel's laugh, once so pure, before greed consumed him. I thought about the times I had bailed Joe out of trouble, written checks to cover his mistakes, and told myself it was just helping family. Each time, I thought it would be the last. Each time I was wrong. And now here I was, paying the ultimate price for years of enabling. I whispered a prayer into the quiet hospital room. Lord, if I can't have their love, at least let me have justice. That night, as the hospital halls grew silent and the lights dimmed, I heard the door to my room creak open again. I expected to see Ruth making her rounds, but instead, I saw a shadow slip inside, tall and heavy. Joe. He closed the door softly behind him, glancing around as if making sure no one saw him enter. His face was pale, his jaw set, and in his hand was something that gleamed in the dim light. A syringe. My breath caught in my throat. The syringe in Joe's hand caught the dim light from the hallway, sending a jolt of terror straight through me. My pulse jumped so high the heart monitor beeped wildly, breaking the silence. Shoo, Joe hissed, stepping closer. You'll wake the whole floor. My throat felt dry as sand. Joe, what are you doing with that? He avoided my eyes, staring instead at the clear liquid inside the syringe. His hand trembled slightly as he rolled it between his fingers. It's just something to help you rest, Mom. You've been in so much pain. I knew a lie when I heard one. His voice lacked warmth, lacked the steady rhythm of truth. This wasn't for my comfort. This was something darker. Joe, I said firmly, summoning strength I didn't know I still had. If you stick that needle in me, you will regret it for the rest of your life. He finally looked up. His eyes, once the bright blue of a playful little boy, were dull now, clouded with fear and desperation. You don't understand, he whispered harshly. They'll come after Emmanuel if I don't do this. They said you've got the money, and if you're not willing to share, then what? I cut him off, my voice shaking. You'd rather kill your own mother than see your son face the consequences of his own mistakes? The silence between us was sharp enough to cut glass. He raised the syringe slightly, as if testing whether he had the courage to go through with it. My heart thumped so loudly I thought it would burst. Then, suddenly, the door opened. Joe. Ruth's voice rang out softly, but with enough force to freeze him in place. He spun around, shoving the syringe behind his back. It's not what it looks like. Ruth stepped fully into the room, her eyes darting from Joe's pale face to my frightened one. Her jaw tightened. It looks exactly like what it is. You need to leave. Now. For a moment, I thought Joe might fight her. His body was tense, his eyes darting toward the syringe hidden in his hand. But then, with a heavy sigh, he stuffed it into his pocket and stormed toward the door. This isn't over, he muttered as he left. That was the extreme. The moment I realized just how close I had come to death at the hands of my own son. When the door shut, Ruth rushed to my side, placing a steadying hand on my arm. Elizabeth, are you all right? I tried to speak, but tears spilled down my cheeks instead. My body shook like a leaf in the wind. He was going to do it. He really was. Ruth pressed her lips into a firm line. You're not safe with them, Elizabeth. Not anymore. I nodded weakly. But where can I go? I can't exactly walk out of here on my own. She sat down beside me, her voice softening. Then we do this smart. We gather proof. We keep recording. And when the time comes, we make sure the law, not their greed, decides what happens next. Her words steadied me. For the next 2 days, I didn't see Joe or Emmanuel. The hospital was quiet, almost peaceful. Ruth took care of me, bringing me tea, reading scripture with me, and even braiding my thinning gray hair to make me feel human again. In those moments, the less extreme side of life returned. I could almost pretend that everything was normal. I even laughed once when Ruth told me a story about her grandmother sneaking chickens into the house during winter storms. It felt good, foreign, but good to laugh again. But the quiet never lasted long. On the third night, I woke to the sound of my window rattling. At first, I thought it was just the wind. Ohio storms had a way of shaking old buildings like toys. But then I saw it. the shadow of someone outside trying to force the window open. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever it was, they weren't using the door this time. I fumbled for the call button, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Before I could press it, the window latch clicked. Slowly, the pane slid upward, and there, climbing inside, was Emmanuel. The window creaked open just enough to let the night air pour in, carrying with it the faint smell of rain-soaked asphalt. My breath hitched when Emmanuel's sneaker appeared on the sill, followed by his lean figure sliding clumsily into the room. His hoodie was pulled low over his face, but I'd know my grandson anywhere. His movements were quick, nervous, like a thief who knew the weight of his crime but was too desperate to care. "Emmanuel," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He froze for a second, then pulled the hood back, revealing those familiar blue eyes. But there was no warmth in them, only calculation. "Grandma," he said quietly, "you weren't supposed to be awake." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I looked at the door, hoping Ruth would appear any moment, but it remained shut. My heart pounded. I was alone with him. "You could have used the door," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "Visiting hours aren't over." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "The door's too risky. Cameras, nurses, paperwork. I needed to see you without anyone watching." A chill ran down my spine. "Why?" He shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket and stepped closer to my bed. "Because Dad says you're being stubborn. You've got money, Grandma, enough to fix everything. But instead, you're wasting it on doctors and strangers." My hands clenched the blanket. "You mean Ruth," I said sharply. "The stranger who's been taking better care of me than my own blood." His jaw tightened. "Don't talk about her like that. She's just doing her job. Your family, we're supposed to come first." "Family," I spat, anger rising in my chest. "Family doesn't sneak into a hospital room at midnight and make demands like a thief in the night." His eyes darkened. "You think we're the bad guys, don't you? But you don't get it, Grandma. These people I owe money to, they don't play around. If I don't pay up soon, it won't just be me who suffers. They'll come after Dad. They'll come after everyone. You're the only one who can stop it." I shook my head. "You made your choices, Emmanuel. And now you want me to clean them up like I always have." For a brief moment, silence filled the room. His eyes darted to the machines beside my bed, then back to me. "If you loved me, really loved me, you'd help." That line, that cruel manipulation, it cut deeper than any knife. "I do love you," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "But love doesn't mean feeding your demons. Love means teaching you to face them." Something flickered in his expression. Anger, maybe guilt, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Then maybe you don't care if I live or die." That was the extreme. Standing there, cornered in my hospital bed, realizing my grandson was no longer the sweet boy who once begged me for bedtime stories. He was a man willing to use fear, guilt, and threats to get what he wanted. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to steady. "Emmanuel, sit down." He hesitated, then reluctantly dropped into the chair beside me. For the first time that night, he looked tired, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his choices. I saw my chance to shift the moment. "Do you remember when you were little, and I used to take you to the county fair?" I asked gently. His eyes flicked up, confused. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," I said softly. "You used to run ahead, laughing, chasing the lights and the music. You were fearless back then. And every time you got scared, you'd grab my hand and say, 'Grandma, don't let go.'" His jaw clenched, but I saw the memory flash across his face. "That was a long time ago," he muttered. I nodded. "Yes, it was. But somewhere along the way, you let go. You let greed and gambling take my grandson away from me." His face softened just slightly. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The less extreme. The brief reminder that somewhere inside him, humanity still lived. But then, just as quickly it was gone. He leaned forward, his voice sharp again. "This isn't about memories. It's about survival. If you don't help me, Grandma, I don't know what I'll have to do." My chest tightened. His words weren't just desperation, they were a threat. Before I could answer, the door handle rattled. Emmanuel shot up, eyes wide with panic. He moved fast, darting back toward the window. But he wasn't quick enough. The door swung open and in walked Ruth, only she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a security guard. Emmanuel Johnson, Ruth said firmly, pointing toward him. Step away from her. Emmanuel Johnson, step away from her. Ruth's voice was calm but carried a sharp edge that could cut through steel. The security guard beside her, a tall man with broad shoulders and a flashlight clipped to his belt, stepped forward, his hand hovering near the radio on his hip. Emmanuel froze in the middle of the room, his hood half fallen off, his chest rising and falling fast. His eyes darted from Ruth to me, then to the guard. Relax, he said quickly, raising his hands as though surrendering. I wasn't going to hurt her. The guard narrowed his eyes. Then why were you climbing through a hospital window at midnight? Emmanuel's mouth opened, but no excuse came. He looked like a boy caught stealing cookies, except this wasn't a kitchen, and what he wanted wasn't sweets. It was my life savings. Ruth crossed her arms. Elizabeth, are you all right? I nodded shakily, though my heart was still racing. He said he needed to talk to me, but he wasn't supposed to be here. The guard took a step closer to Emmanuel. Sir, you're trespassing. If you don't leave now, I'll have to call the police. For a second, I thought Emmanuel would fight back. His fists tightened at his sides and his jaw locked. But then, with a frustrated groan, he yanked his hood back over his head and muttered, Fine. I'm leaving. He climbed back out the window, dropping into the night with a dull thud. The guard rushed over and locked the latch behind him, then pulled the blind shut. Ruth turned to me, her face tight with worry. Elizabeth, you can't keep going through this. It's not safe. I swallowed, my throat dry. I know. The guard gave me a nod. If he shows up again, hit that call button immediately. We'll handle it. When he left, the room finally felt still again. The hum of the machines returned, steady and familiar. But my chest was heavy, weighed down by the reality of what just happened. My grandson had climbed through a hospital window like a burglar, and the only thing that stopped him was Ruth and a stranger in a uniform. I lay back against the pillows, exhausted. Ruth pulled the blanket up to my chin and sat beside me. I told you we'd keep recording, but I think it's time we go further. If he tries something again, we need solid proof the police can use. Her words made sense, but my heart ached. I never wanted it to come to this. Never wanted my family's name dragged through courts and police reports. But what choice did I have? Do what you have to do, I whispered. The next morning, the sun peeked through the blinds, warm and golden. For a brief while, life seemed almost normal. Abigail visited again, bringing me fresh flowers. She kissed my forehead gently and told me the kids at home were praying for me every night. Her presence gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. We laughed about old times, about how, as a teenager, she once tried to sneak out of the house by tying bedsheets together like in a movie, only to get stuck halfway down. For an hour, we were just mother and daughter again. No money, no inheritance, no greed. Just us. That was the less extreme. A small reminder of what love was supposed to feel like. But peace is fragile, and mine shattered again that evening. I had just finished dinner when a loud commotion erupted in the hallway. Shouts, hurried footsteps, and the crackle of a walkie-talkie filled the air. My door burst open, and the same security guard from the night before rushed in, his face pale. Mrs. Johnson, he said urgently, we need to move you. Now. My heart lurched. What's happening? He didn't answer, just started unplugging the rolling machines beside me. Ruth appeared seconds later, her face tight with fear. Elizabeth, listen to me, she said, gripping my hand. Joe is here, and he's not alone. The words hit me like ice water. Joe is here, and he's not alone. The guard moved fast, yanking cords free from the wall and preparing to wheel my bed down the hall. My chest tightened as fear clawed at me. If Joe had come this far into a hospital with who knew what kind of men at his side, it meant he was desperate. And desperate people were dangerous. The pounding of heavy boots echoed from down the hall. Shouts followed, voices I didn't recognize but filled with anger. Ruth leaned close, whispering fiercely into my ear. Stay calm. I'm not leaving your side. The guard pushed my bed into motion, the wheels squeaking as we rushed out of the room. The hallway lights flickered across my face, too bright, too sharp, like the world itself was on edge. Where are we going? I gasped. Emergency exit, the guard said quickly. We'll get you to a secure room until the police arrive. But before we could turn the corner, a voice thundered from behind us. Mom, Joe's voice. The bed jerked to a stop as the guard planted himself between us and the sound. I craned my neck, and there he was, Joe, my son, standing in the hallway with two men behind him. Strangers, both tall, both mean-looking, both with tattoos curling up their necks like snakes. Mom, we need to talk, Joe said, his tone too casual for the menace standing beside him. The guard raised his hand. Sir, you can't be here. You and your friends need to leave now. Joe smirked, ignoring him. His eyes locked on me. Mom, you've made this harder than it needed to be. Emmanuel's in over his head. These men came with me tonight, so you can understand how serious this is. One of the strangers cracked his knuckles, stepping closer. The fluorescent light glinted off a chain hanging from his belt. Fear gripped me, but I forced myself to speak. Joe, do you even hear yourself? You're threatening your own mother in a hospital. His jaw tightened. I'm saving my son, and you're standing in the way. That was the extreme. Seeing my boy, my flesh and blood, standing with criminals, turning my sickness into a weapon against me. The guard spoke into his radio, calling for backup. Ruth gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, her knuckles white. Then, from down the hall, the sound of sirens grew louder. Police. Relief washed over me like cool rain. The men swore under their breath, and Joe's face twisted with frustration. This isn't over, Mom, he spat. You can't hide behind nurses and cops forever. They turned and bolted down the opposite hallway, just as two officers rounded the corner. The guard waved them toward the fleeing figures, and within seconds, the chase echoed through the hospital corridors. The hallway fell silent again. My body sagged into the mattress, every ounce of strength draining from me. That night, I was moved to a private, locked room on another floor. Security was tightened. Ruth stayed by my side. For the first time in weeks, Abigail called twice in one night, her voice shaking as she begged me to hold on. Please, Mom, don't give up. They'll get what's coming. For a few days, life slowed down. The nurses tiptoed around me, offering gentle smiles and extra blankets. Ruth brought me crossword puzzles, and Abigail came by with homemade soup. Those small kindnesses were the less extreme moments, like little candles lit against the darkness pressing in. But the calm didn't last. On the fourth night, as I drifted in and out of sleep, Ruth nudged my arm gently. Elizabeth, wake up. I opened my eyes groggily. Her face was pale, her voice low. Look. She pointed toward the small television mounted in the corner of the room. The late-night news was on. The reporter's voice was crisp, urgent. Police are asking for the public's help in locating Joe Johnson and his son Emmanuel Johnson, wanted for questioning after an incident at St. Mary's Hospital. Authorities warn the men may be armed and dangerous. My stomach dropped. My son and grandson now fugitives. And then came the cliffhanger. The reporter's words made the blood in my veins run cold. Police believe the men may be targeting a specific family member, and sources suggest that family member is currently under hospital care. The camera cut to a photo of me. The television screen flickered, and there I was, my hospital portrait, the one Abigail had once uploaded for a church directory. Now it glowed across the city as the anchor's voice declared me the target of two wanted men. I couldn't breathe. My own son, my own grandson, and the world now knew they were hunting me. Ruth quickly grabbed the remote and turned the volume down, but not before the reporter's words seared themselves into my ears. If you see these men, do not approach. Call authorities immediately. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside me. Ruth set the remote aside and clasped my trembling hand. Elizabeth, don't panic. They won't get close to you here. Security is doubled, and after tonight, I'm going to request a transfer to another ward. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her worry. My heart pounded. Everyone knows now. My face, my name. I'm not just a patient anymore. I'm a target on live TV. The truth was unbearable. The humiliation of it cut almost as deep as the fear. To the world, I was no longer Elizabeth Johnson, retired schoolteacher from Georgia. I was the old woman whose family turned against her. I covered my face with my hands, the tears spilling hot down my cheeks. That was the extreme. Not just the betrayal itself, but the public branding of it. My shame and fear displayed for strangers to dissect over their dinner tables. The less extreme came later, when Abigail arrived the next morning. She came rushing into the room with red eyes and trembling lips, clutching a thermos of soup, like it was her last offering of comfort. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, "I'm so sorry. I saw the news. I can't believe it's come to this." She set the thermos down on the bedside table and dropped into the chair beside me, grabbing both my hands in hers. "Don't you dare feel ashamed," she whispered fiercely. "You didn't ask for this. They made their choices, not you." Her warmth wrapped around me like a blanket. For a while, we sat quietly, just mother and daughter, hands entwined. Ruth busied herself near the window, giving us space. I looked at Abigail, at her kind eyes, her lines of worry carved from years of working too hard for her family. "You're the only one who still sees me as a person, not a wallet." She shook her head, tears glistening. "No, Mom. You're my best friend, my strength. If anything happens to you," she broke off, pressing her forehead against my hand. I can't even finish that sentence. For the rest of the day, she stayed. She read aloud from a magazine. She fluffed my pillows. We laughed about silly things, even if the laughter was weak and nervous. It was a less extreme day, a pocket of peace carved into the chaos. But peace never lasts when danger stalks your steps. That night, as Ruth helped me settle into sleep, a soft knock sounded at the door. Not the sharp, official rap of a guard. Not the cheery knock of a nurse on rounds. This one was different, hesitant, uneven. Ruth froze, her hand hovering over the light switch. She glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. The knock came again, louder this time. "Elizabeth," a voice whispered from the other side. My stomach dropped. Even muffled by the door, I recognized it. "Emmanuel." "Elizabeth." The whisper slithered under the door, soft but sharp enough to slice through the dark. My chest tightened, and every muscle in my body went rigid. Ruth straightened, stepping between me and the door as though her small frame could shield me. "Stay quiet," she mouthed. But Emmanuel didn't stop. He knocked again, gentle taps like fingernails against wood. "Grandma, it's me. Please, just talk to me." The sound of his voice, once the sweet tone of a boy who begged for cookies after dinner, now chilled me to the bone. Ruth reached for the call button. Before she pressed it, she leaned toward me. "Do not answer, no matter what he says." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. From the hall, Emmanuel's whisper grew more desperate. "I know you're awake. I just need to explain. Please, Grandma. I don't want to hurt you. I never did." The lie burned worse than any truth. I could still hear his words from weeks before, dripping venom into my ear. "Die faster, we need the money." Ruth pressed the button. Within seconds, static crackled from the speaker. A guard's voice responded. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson?" Ruth spoke calmly but firmly. "He's outside. Emmanuel Johnson. At the door." The speaker crackled again. "We're on our way." Footsteps thundered down the hall. Emmanuel cursed under his breath. Then the sound of retreating shoes echoed, fading quickly into silence. That was the extreme, the moment of his voice at my door, reaching for me like a shadow reaching for the light. The guards checked the floor and confirmed he was gone, but they posted one outside my room for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep. Every creak, every distant voice felt like a threat waiting to burst through. The next morning brought a fragile calm. Abigail returned, her eyes heavy from worry but still filled with love. Ruth updated her quietly about what had happened overnight, and my daughter gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "He came here? Again?" I nodded. My voice was hoarse. He whispered like he thought he could charm his way back in. But I heard the truth in him weeks ago. Abigail sat at the edge of my bed and smoothed my blanket. "Mom, when this is over, you won't ever have to face them again. I'll make sure of it. You'll live with me with the kids. We'll surround you with love, not this madness. Her words soothed me more than the medicine ever could. For a few hours, we talked about lighter things, the grandchildren's school plays, the peach cobbler Abigail had promised to bake when I got out, even the silly way our old dog used to chase his tail until he fell over. It was a less extreme day, a pocket of safety. But deep down, I knew storms never stay away for long. That evening, as Abigail prepared to leave, Ruth helped me sit up straighter in bed. She whispered quietly so the guard wouldn't overhear. Elizabeth, the recordings we've gathered, they're strong. But I think we need something final, something undeniable, to put this to rest. If Emmanuel or Joe shows their face again, let's capture it clearly. No whispers, no shadows. Proof that can't be twisted. I hesitated, but then nodded. Do it. End this. Ruth gave a determined nod. But as she spoke, the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the room went black. The machines beside me beeped in alarm. The guard outside shouted. And from the darkness, I heard a low laugh. A man's voice. Familiar. Guess who's back, Mom? It was Joe. The room plunged into total darkness. Machines screeched and flatlined, their screens glowing faintly like dying stars. Guess who's back, Mom? Joe's voice was unmistakable. Low. Mocking. Too close. I couldn't see him, but I could feel his presence. The air in the room seemed heavier, charged with menace. My throat closed as terror rushed through me. Stay calm, Elizabeth, Ruth whispered urgently, her hand fumbling for the flashlight clipped to the wall. She turned it on, the narrow beam slicing through the dark. The light caught Joe's face. He was standing just inside the doorway, his eyes wild, his shirt soaked with sweat. He looked like a man cornered, a man who had gambled and lost and was now clawing for his last chance. The guard outside banged on the locked door. Open this now. Johnson, step away from her. But Joe only grinned, his teeth flashing in the thin beam of Ruth's light. Relax. I just want to talk to my mother. He took one step forward. Ruth immediately raised the flashlight like a weapon, her voice sharp. One more move and I'll scream this building down. Joe scoffed but stopped. His eyes darted to me. Mom, they're painting me like a monster. On TV, in the papers. But you know me. You know I'm just trying to protect my family. Everything I've done, it was for Emmanuel. His words twisted the knife deeper. Protect his family? By sneaking into my hospital room? By bringing criminals to my bedside? By whispering death into his own mother's ear? My lips trembled, but I forced myself to speak. No, Joe. You did this for greed. Don't you dare dress it up as love. For a moment, his mask slipped. His smile faltered. His eyes hardened. Then maybe, he said slowly, I should stop asking and start taking. That was the extreme. My son threatening me in the dark, his desperation seeping into every corner of the room. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered back on. The machines rebooted, their beeping steadying the air again. The door burst open as two guards stormed in, guns drawn. Joe cursed and bolted, slipping past them with a speed I didn't know he still had. Shouts echoed down the hall as the chase began. My body collapsed into the mattress, every muscle trembling. Ruth lowered the flashlight, her face pale. He's crossed the line, Elizabeth. There's no coming back for him now. The less extreme came the next morning. Abigail arrived with puffy eyes but a firm jaw. She set a small notebook on my bedside table. Mom, we're going to document everything. Every word, every attempt, every threat. When this is over, they won't be able to deny anything. For an hour, we went over every detail. The whispers, the window, the midnight knocks. Ruth added her own entries, her neat handwriting capturing the events like puzzle pieces fitting into place. It felt almost empowering, taking control of the narrative, turning fear into evidence. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't just waiting for the next blow. I was preparing for it. That evening, the hospital grew quiet again. The hum of machines, the shuffle of nurses, the low murmur of televisions in distant rooms. I began to drift into a fragile sleep. But then glass shattered. The sound tore through the silence, sharp and violent. My eyes flew open, and I turned my head toward the window. The curtain billowed inward, shards of glass glittering on the floor. And through the broken frame, Emmanuel climbed in. The shards of glass crunched under Emmanuel's sneakers as he landed in the hospital room. My heart raced, thumping against my ribcage like a drum. "Grandma," he whispered, voice soft but edged with desperation. Ruth was immediately between us, standing tall despite her smaller frame. "Emmanuel, get back. Now." "Step away from her." He froze, eyes darting between Ruth and me. The moonlight cast jagged shadows across his face, making him look half boy, half monster. The same boy I once held in my arms, now twisted by desperation and greed. "Mom," he said, stepping closer, his hands raised slightly as though to show he meant no harm. "I didn't want to scare you. I need to explain. Please." The extreme was palpable. My own grandson, crawling through a broken window in the middle of the night, standing over me with a mix of fear and intent that I couldn't ignore. "Explain what, Emmanuel?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How you tried to kill me. How you snuck in like a thief." He flinched at my words. I didn't. Not really. I just what?" I cut in sharply. "You whispered for me to die. That's what you did. Don't lie." He looked down, shame flashing across his face. I panicked. I wanted the money, but I didn't want to hurt you. I swear." Ruth pressed a hand to my shoulder. "Elizabeth, stay calm. We need to think." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind inside me. "You know, Emmanuel, fear changes people. But so does love. You've forgotten both." He looked up at me, eyes pleading. "I know I messed up. But Mom, I can fix it. I can make it right." I shook my head slowly. Some things aren't about fixing anymore. Some things are about facing consequences. Ruth's voice softened. "Elizabeth, maybe this is the moment we show him that choices have real results. That actions matter. That kindness and empathy aren't optional." The less extreme came next. We spoke quietly, almost like old friends negotiating peace. Ruth and Abigail joined me over the next few hours, whispering instructions for safety, detailing plans to document Emmanuel's next steps. We strategized about cameras, about keeping him contained, about ensuring the law had undeniable proof of every attempt. And yet, even in this calm, a shadow of fear remained. I thought about the past weeks, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the constant plotting. Could he ever truly understand what he'd done? "Mom," Ruth said gently, "you've already survived so much. And if we keep careful, we can survive the rest." I nodded, drawing strength from her words. "Yes, we will survive. And when it's over, they'll have no power over me, over my life, over my peace." But just as we settled into what felt like a fragile moment of calm, a low, sinister laugh echoed from the hallway. It was unmistakable. Joe. He had returned. The sound of his boots against the linoleum was slow, deliberate. Each step a drumbeat of dread. My pulse raced again, faster than ever before. Ruth grabbed my arm, her face pale. "Elizabeth, he's coming. Get ready." Emmanuel froze at the sound of his father. His eyes widened in fear, the boyish part of him surfacing for the first time in weeks. Joe's voice cut through the air. "You think you can hide behind cameras and guards? You think this ends without me?" And just like that, the extreme hit again, the father and son, united in greed and desperation, closing in on me in the hospital room. The hallway lights reflected off the polished hospital floor as Joe's boots approached. Emmanuel froze, caught between his father's momentum and the fear in his own heart. "Step aside, Mom," Joe called, his voice calm but carrying an unspoken threat. "This ends tonight." I sat up in bed, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. "Step aside?" "I'm 65 years old, Joe, and I'm not stepping aside for thieves, liars, or men who whisper death into their grandmother's ears." His eyes narrowed. "Don't make me do something we'll all regret." The extreme was immediate and palpable, father and son, standing together, closing in like a storm I couldn't escape. Ruth tightened her grip on my arm. "Elizabeth, stay calm. Follow my lead." The guard outside spoke urgently into the radio, but we knew it would take time for backup to arrive. Seconds stretched into eternity. Emmanuel looked between us, his hands shaking. Dad, maybe we shouldn't. Joe cut him off sharply. Silence. I know what I'm doing. But then something unexpected happened. The less extreme moment flickered into existence. Emmanuel faltered, his eyes dropping to the floor. For a brief second, I saw the boy who once clutched my hand at the county fair, terrified of fireworks. You don't have to do this, Joe, Emmanuel muttered, his voice small. Joe's gaze flicked to his son, and for a moment, tension cracked across his stern face. It was fleeting, but it was there, a hesitation that Ruth and I noticed immediately. I seized the opportunity. You can still make the right choice, Emmanuel. And Joe, you can still walk away. This isn't about money. This is about what kind of man you want to be remembered as. Ruth moved quietly toward the emergency call button, pressing it again. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder. Joe's fist clenched. You think the law can save you, he hissed, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. The less extreme moment deepened. I realized something crucial. They were scared. Fear had driven them here, but fear also made them vulnerable. Their greed had blinded them, but their instincts, love, even twisted, still lingered faintly. You don't have to be monsters, I whispered. You can stop this. You can still choose kindness, empathy, and forgiveness before it's too late. Joe's jaw twitched. Emmanuel looked at his father, then at me. His breathing was uneven, his hands shaking. The tension thickened the room like heavy fog. Then the extreme hit again, harder than before. The window behind the bed shattered violently. Glass exploded onto the floor as a shadow lunged through. My breath caught in my throat. Before I could react, a second figure appeared. Ruth shouted, and the guard immediately aimed his flashlight. Joe froze, eyes widening. Emmanuel stumbled back, fear overtaking him. And standing there, silhouetted against the moonlight, was someone I never expected. An unknown man with a dark hood, holding a long, menacing object. Not so fast, the man growled, advancing. The room erupted into chaos. Joe and Emmanuel pressed against the wall, Ruth shielding me, alarms blaring. The unknown intruder's presence added a new layer of danger that I couldn't have predicted. And just like that, the extreme hit again. My hospital room, once a place of healing, now transformed into a battlefield. The sirens were close, but whether they would arrive in time was a question I didn't dare answer. The intruder stepped closer, his face hidden beneath the dark hood. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to hide, to cry. But I was trapped in my hospital bed. Joe and Emmanuel pressed against the wall, their bodies tense, their expressions a mix of fear and confusion. The unknown figure raised the object slowly, just enough to glint in the emergency light. Ruth's hand went to the radio again, but I stopped her with a trembling finger. Wait. Are you insane? She hissed. I think I know him, I whispered. The intruder paused, tilting his head slightly. A small grin crept across his face, and the hood fell back. It was Michael, one of the nurses from my wing, the one I had always trusted, the one who brought me tea and checked my vitals meticulously. You? I gasped. Yes, he said calmly. I've been recording everything. Every threat, every cruel word, every step they took to hurt you. The extreme shifted to shock. A nurse, hidden in plain sight, holding proof that could save me from the men who had haunted me for weeks. Joe's eyes narrowed. What are you doing, Michael? I'm keeping you from hurting her, Michael said, his voice firm. And I have the evidence to make sure the law knows exactly what happened here. You're done, Joe. Emmanuel, you too. Emmanuel's face fell, a mixture of relief and guilt crossing his features. Mom, I shook my head, voice quivering but growing steadier. No, Emmanuel, you listen. This isn't about saving your face. This is about making choices right. Every single one of you. Michael moved forward, pulling out a tablet from his pocket. On the screen, clear videos of Joe and Emmanuel's attempts, the midnight window climbs, even the whispered threats, all recorded without them knowing. The less extreme moment came as the guards arrived, alerted by Ruth's earlier calls. They quickly apprehended Joe and Emmanuel, securing the hospital room. The chaos subsided slightly as calm returned, at least temporarily. Ruth helped me sit up straighter, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Abigail rushed in, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, are you okay? You're safe." I nodded, my chest heavy but relieved. "Thanks to Michael. And Ruth. And you, Abigail. I'm okay for now." The calm lingered as the police processed the scene, taking statements and reviewing the footage Michael had recorded. Joe and Emmanuel were handcuffed, their faces pale with shock and fear. I finally allowed myself to breathe. The betrayal, heartbreak, and terror of the last few weeks felt like a dark cloud beginning to lift. But the extreme wasn't over. As the officers led Joe and Emmanuel away, Michael turned to me. His expression hardened slightly. "There's one more thing you need to see." He handed me a small envelope, sealed with wax. I hesitated, then broke it open. Inside were documents, legal papers, evidence, and instructions that made my heart skip a beat. The content suggested that Joe and Emmanuel weren't acting alone. Someone else, someone I hadn't seen or considered, had been orchestrating parts of this scheme. My pulse quickened as I read. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The room seemed to shrink around me, the hospital walls closing in with the weight of what I now knew. Someone else had planned, manipulated, and pulled strings to target me, not just for money, but for something darker, something bigger. And in that instant, the cliffhanger struck. A shadow passed the hallway window. I looked up and saw a familiar face. Ruth gasped. It was Abigail, but her expression, it wasn't her usual warmth. It was cold, calculating. My eyes widened as Abigail stepped closer, her face illuminated by the harsh hallway light. But there was something off, something in her gaze that didn't belong to the daughter who had comforted me through countless nights. "Mom," she began, her voice low, almost unfamiliar. Ruth stepped between us instantly. "Abigail, what are you doing here? Where's that warmth I know?" Abigail's lips curled slightly, a faint smirk playing at the corners. "You've been through so much, and yet you think you know everyone, don't you?" The extreme hit like a hammer to my chest. My daughter, the one I trusted most, now stood before me with a coldness I had never seen. I shook my head, trying to steady my voice. "Abigail, what is this? What's going on?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket, very similar to the one Michael had given me. My pulse quickened. "Open it," she said softly, yet her eyes burned with intensity. I hesitated, glancing at Ruth, who gave me a slight shake of her head, a warning to be careful. But curiosity and the unspoken sense that I needed to know pushed me forward. Inside the envelope were photographs, documents, and messages, carefully collected proof of someone manipulating events behind the scenes. Someone who had been pulling Joe and Emmanuel's strings for weeks. And Abigail? She held a copy of the documents too, her expression unreadable. The less extreme followed as I struggled to process the revelation. "Abigail, why? Why would you bring this to me like this? What is going on?" She sighed, stepping back and lowering her gaze. "Mom, I've been trying to protect you all along. But sometimes the people you love are capable of things you can't imagine. I needed to know what was happening to make sure you were safe." Her words softened the moment slightly, but the tension remained. The fact that she had withheld information, moved independently, and brought this envelope to me under such strange circumstances left a gnawing unease. Ruth's voice cut through the quiet. "Elizabeth, we need to focus. Whoever is behind all this, they're still out there. And we have to act before they make another move." I nodded, my heart heavy but determined. The less extreme moments were brief, but they allowed me to gather my strength, my wits, and my resolve. We spent the next hours reviewing the documents, connecting the dots, and planning the final steps to ensure the safety of the hospital, Michael's evidence, and myself. For a while, I felt almost in control again. Almost. But control is fragile. Just as I began to feel a small sense of relief, the hospital's intercom crackled to life. "Attention all staff. Code red. Repeat, code red. Security breach in the East Wing." The words made my blood run cold. Before anyone could react, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside my room. The glass of the emergency exit door shattered, splinters flying across the floor. Ruth shielded me instinctively, pulling me down behind the bed. And then the extreme hit with full force. A figure stepped into the room, tall, dark, and masked. The stranger's eyes gleamed with a cold precision. In his hand, he held a device that made the lights flicker violently, plunging the room into a terrifying half-light. Abigail froze, her face pale. Even she hadn't expected this. Ruth whispered sharply, "Elizabeth, stay down. Don't move." My heart pounded. The intruder advanced slowly, deliberately. And from the shadows, a low, menacing voice said, "Did you really think it was over?" The intruder's voice lingered in the shadows, cold and merciless. My chest heaved as I pressed myself against the bed, Ruth's hand gripping mine like an anchor. Abigail had stepped back, uncertain, her envelope clutched tightly. Michael stood at the edge of the room, tablet in hand, ready. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling but sharp. "What do you want?" The figure stepped closer, the flickering lights casting jagged shadows across the floor. "I want what's mine," he said. The device in his hand hummed, lights pulsing ominously. Ruth's eyes narrowed. "You're not leaving this room without law enforcement seeing you." The intruder laughed softly. "You think the police will get here in time?" But he didn't see Michael. The nurse's tablet had been recording live, streaming every move directly to the authorities and to the hospital security system. Every step, every flick of the hand, every intention was captured. In that split second, my fear transformed into clarity. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the endless nights of terror, they all led to this moment. "Elizabeth," Michael whispered, "we've got everything. Every threat, every plot. They won't be able to touch you after this." The intruder paused, sensing that something was off. But it was too late. Guards, alerted by the live feed, stormed the room. "Freeze," one shouted, and the intruder's device fell from his hands as he realized escape was impossible. The figure lunged, but Abigail, surprising everyone, stepped forward and blocked the path, her stance firm. "Not this time. You're done." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then the guard secured him, cuffing him tightly. Relief washed over me like a wave I'd waited years to feel. Joe and Emmanuel had already been detained thanks to Michael's earlier recordings. And now, the last puppet master, this intruder, the hidden hand behind the chaos, was finally stopped. The less extreme followed as the hospital staff checked on me, cleaned up the shattered glass, and made sure everyone was safe. Ruth helped me sit upright in bed, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. "You're safe now, Elizabeth," she said softly. Abigail knelt beside me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything earlier. I wanted to make sure you were ready, that you'd be safe. I should have come to you sooner." I reached out and held her hand. "You did what you thought was right. We survived because of everyone's love and courage. That's what matters." Michael stepped closer, holding the tablet. "All of this, the recordings, the evidence, we're going to make sure it's presented properly. Justice will be served." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small smile. The betrayal and heartbreak had left scars, but I had survived, and those who had wronged me would face the consequences. The extreme returned one last time, not as a threat, but as closure. The authorities led Joe, Emmanuel, and the intruder out of the hospital. Each step they took echoed the finality of justice being delivered. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare that had haunted me was over. And yet, in that moment of triumph, I realized the true victory wasn't just survival, it was the strength I had found within myself. The courage to face betrayal, the empathy to understand even the flawed, and the wisdom to take control of my life. Ruth, Abigail, and Michael gathered around me, their presence a shield stronger than any security guard or locked door. "Mom," Abigail whispered, "what now?" I took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of life returning. Now we live. We heal. We remember the lessons, but we don't let fear rule us anymore. Ruth squeezed my hand. "And you won't. Not ever again." The sun rose through the hospital windows, bathing the room in golden light. The nightmare was behind me, the betrayals confronted, and justice served. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe, truly breathe, and know that peace, hard-earned, well-deserved, was mine. As I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by me, I knew that kindness, courage, and empathy weren't just words. They were shields, lights, and lifelines in the darkest of nights. And with that, the story ended not with fear, not with loss, but with triumph, resilience, and hope.